Welcome to the Embodiment podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with embodiment specialists from around the world. I'm your host, Mark Walsh.
So on the show today, Pierre Goirand. Pierre, whose name I just murdered because of my bad French, is an extremely experienced business consultant over 25 years working with business. I'm particularly interested in areas of large group facilitation, collective intelligence. Maybe you can tell us what that is. He's the first leadership embodiment trainer we had. That's a particular modality. Experience in Tai Chi, Systema, EFC graduate, all sorts of things. He's got a CV as long as your arm. So Pierre, welcome.
Thank you for having me on the show.
So you're our first French guest. Are you in Paris today?
Actually, I'm in the Drôme, which is in the south of France. I have two houses. I live part-time in Paris, actually most of the time. But I've been wanting to be closer to nature, which actually is so important in our work. And I'm lucky, very fortunate to have this little house since about now 4 years. And so I'm basically spend my days gardening. I'm becoming obsessed with gardening.
Draws you in. I used to be a professional gardener years ago. That's how I went my way through university when I decided drug dealing was too risky. Gardening really brings you to the body. So your story, not mine. What was the beginning of your journey with the body?
With the body? With the body. When I think about that, I think about my disastrous episodes with learning judo as a child, and I just absolutely hated the pulling and tugging and this idea just to be able to smash someone and keep it without moving. So I didn't have a very good, or at least not the kind of judo teacher that I would have liked to be. Absolutely no embodiment really, but a lot of physicality of being stronger than the other person. And I moved on to karate later, but really at the beginning, my body. I have this picture of me doing bodybuilding, and trying to have a nice shape. I was concerned with that very much as a child. Didn't find myself strong enough, so that was a big issue. And for boys, it often is, get stronger,
I remember I lost my first girlfriend at like 17, my first serious girlfriend anyway. And I thought, if I just lift some weights, then maybe she'll like me, and I kind of was lifting. I remember these kind of plastic weights I had, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but it was very much driven by that external, people often talk about women in this regard in terms of being slim, but I think certainly see that pressure on boys as well to be muscular.
Yeah, that and to find a way not to be beaten up at school.
Mm-hmm.
That's the second.
That's a terror that maybe half the world's population don't understand. Like going to school every day and going, I hope I'm not physically assaulted today. Like,
I used to be terrorized about that.
Yeah, a whole year of my life, I was just in fear of walking out the door. Like, am I going to get ambushed on the way home tonight? That was a real fear for a while.
And we don't talk enough about that because I think it really has shaped boys' psyche. I mean, some stronger than others, but I think it's there.
Yeah. In terms of thinking the world's a dangerous place, that kind of the terror of a gang of other kids beating you up and humiliating you on top of that. I mean, I think that kind of low level or high level, sometimes physical bullying, which is just the norm for most boys growing up, is not really talked about.
Yeah, and it's really, in a way, it's also has bare relationship to our work also, which is a lot has to do with finding one's power again, but in a deeper way. But before I got there, because you're asking about my relationship to my body, what was very important for me was pain. Pain has been an engine in my growth, and I remember coming back to France in the very early, actually in 1990, after having worked in the US for a while. And I had this new job that was kind of a really high pressure job for me because I was starting again in a new country. I had a baby. And this job was very new. It was in PR agency, communication agency. And I was in charge of large accounts. And I was presented as the specialist in strategy, which actually I was not. So I had to kind of invent my skills, you know. I guess my boss trusted me enough. But anyway, I found myself almost every other weekend being in my bedroom with all the shutters closed in the dark with a huge migraine, you know. And if it was not a migraine, it would be a backache. And if it would not be a backache, it would be losing my voice, literally. It was something
It's psychosomatic stuff based on the stress.
Total. And usually on Monday, I was fine again, and I was working my ass off, which is the way I usually work. I kind of really very driven by results and this kind of things. And so that was, this reaction from my body was something I lived with for about 2 years up to the moment where I got sick of it. You know, and I remember very well because I was facilitating a large seminar for SmithKline Beecham, you know, pharmaceutical company, and I had the basically 10 finance directors of Europe in one room for 2 days, and I arrived at the at the seminar, which was a vision seminar, and basically I couldn't speak at all. I had no voice, and so I had to do this seminar with that. And after that. I said, okay, you know, I got to do something about it, about this whole thing. So I started with voice, but then
because you identified, like, hang on a minute, I'm a clever guy, I'm working in business at a high level. You know, were you training in consulting by that point as well?
I was a head of a department, but basically I created a consulting department within that company. Yeah, which was... Got
it. And then you went, hang on a minute, it looks like I'm missing a piece here. Even though I'm a smart guy, I'm doing my job, but I'm missing this body piece. Is that sort of a fair summary there?
Actually, it was simpler than that. It was, how can I survive? How can I just be operational? Right. I know, really, at first it was very simple. I have no voice. How can I get my voice? I got a back pain. How can I get my back together? I got a headache. How can I function and without taking so much aspirin, which anyway didn't work, right? Yeah. But that set me on a course, and in a way, it's through that course that I got really interested in the body. And for example, to take just one example, working with voice, I was so lucky. I found this beautiful orthophonist, beautiful in terms of her skills, really. And she was because she was an older woman, and she had such a way to work with voice. It was like a total improvisation. I just had to repeat vowels over and over, and she was like basically tuning my body. And sometimes just having a gentle touch on the shoulder, on the face. And then she would say, oh no, now go on a U instead of a oo. And that would be a whole hour of vibrating. And absolutely loved this experience, which I came for the therapy, but I loved the experience of actually feeling my body. Hearing it, but feeling that resonance, and also discovering that depending on what one does with one's body, one feels different afterwards. So that it was a very direct experience. Oh, so I breathe for an hour. Well, I feel a different person.
And that's maybe obvious, to interrupt there, it's maybe obvious to us as sort of embodiment trainers, but actually that's a huge insight the first time you have it, isn't it? Like, wow, I can feel different based on these really simple things.
Absolutely. And I came from far, as I try to describe. And not only I feel difference, different, but I become different.
Yeah. So there's the embodiment piece, right? We're not just pumping our state. We're going, hey, the world looks different. I think differently. My being is being changed here, both short term and long term. And that's the real wow point.
Exactly. And I didn't have the word embodiment at the time. I didn't, didn't know what it was. But I made that same, I had that same kind of insights through different means, through different activities. For the back, I started to work on Qigong and Tai Chi. That's how I got into Tai Chi. And there too, wow, I discovered the unity of the body, for example. Ooh, to feel whole. What a beautiful thing. And it was not easy. That was actually my first understanding was that I was not feeling whole. I was moving one part of the body and I could not connect my hand with my belly, and even less my hand with my feet. And how to keep an erected posture. That was also very big. I would move in all sorts of disarticulated ways, really. And how to relax also and soften, all these dimensions. And the beauty is that I understood it not from just a purely physical way, but I understood it at the level of my being, and I am softening, I am connecting the different parts of myself. So it became really an area of personal growth.
Yeah. So sometimes say that's the difference between embodiment and just mindfulness or athleticism. Athleticism is I'm softening, I'm softening, I'm relaxing the meat, and the mindfulness is I'm aware of the meat as I relax it, and then the embodiment is I'm relaxing myself. And it's that level of kind of insight is okay, now we're playing in this field now. I had no idea that existed, and often there's a bit of a disturbing wake-up call in terms of just how much we're not aware of. I remember one time training aikido and my teacher's going, well, you do realize you're contracting your pectorals and your deltoids and all these unnecessary muscles. And I was just no, I had no idea I was doing that.
And that path of body awareness. When I came from so far, which is actually why I can now relate to people who come from far. It's very useful for me,
I think naturals make terrible teachers, and people like us who are, I was a very slow learner in my aikido class back at university, very cognitive person, and I can remember what it's like to just not get these things. And
so important.
So obviously you had the business consultant side, and you've worked with people like Orange and KPMG and McDonald's and Adidas. I'm looking on your site here, United Nations, Nestle, and there's all kinds of logos there that people have heard of. How are you finding, what was the initial stages of bringing it into corporates, and how has that journey been for you over the last, over the period that you've done that?
Well, in a way, it started to first merge in my corporate work for myself first.
Yeah, and I think that's the best way around.
So because I would start. I remember I started to be aware of my postures and bring it in my work. Feel different. I was very scared of facilitating groups. I was not natural there either. My boss told me, remember I was in charge of strategy, and my boss say, oh, Pierre, you're really smart, and with groups you're terrible. So that was his encouragement, and it was right. So I had to learn everything. And I learned a lot from working with maybe the best teachers in the facilitation world. I would travel to the States to learn with them, or to Sweden. I remember with Marvin Weisbord, people like that. And but half of my growth came from what I did in martial arts, in dance later. So I started to basically relate to space differently, relate to people differently, because I would relate to myself differently. So that was the first stage. And then the second stage, I became more consciously interested in, how can I bring some of those learning that I get from practicing for, I don't know, maybe 12 hours a week. How can I bring some of it to the field of business, which is a field that does not have any time, right?
Yeah. Time. This is the big commodity, isn't it, in business? The scarcity is the time. And, I love this order that you did this in. And that was really the only option up until the last 10 years in Europe, because there weren't people teaching how to work with the body in business. I mean, my company was one of the first, if not the first, dedicated company of doing that 10 years ago in Europe. And there was some in the States that maybe predated that, like Strozzi and stuff. But I mean, 10 years ago, it was impossible to do it any other way other than you described, which is you had to be deeply immersed in it yourself. And then that starts to show up first in yourself. And then you go, hang on a minute, this is amazing for me. How do I bring it to my clients who are not going to roll around and do aikido, who are not going to spend 10 hours a week doing Tai Chi? They just don't have the time or the inclination to do that. So how do we then make it efficient for that group? And then the next piece is, how do I fucking sell it?
Exactly.
In a way that isn't going to be totally repulsive. I mean, that was the journey of my business the first 3 to 5 years, was just, how do I speak about this and package it? Because it's coming from this old counterculture.
Yeah. And so first, I mean, I had really I didn't know that field existed. Even, the Strozzi, I was not aware of the existence of people like Strozzi, Wendy, Palmer, and all that. So I was basically, as you described, trying to invent. I was not thinking about creating a business around embodiment, but I was just wanting to do my business of facilitation and helping organization or groups or individual transform, to do that in a better way, right? So I began to play, and then I would say, okay, what can I use? So, for example, I started with very simple stuff, things like to learn to synchronize. Okay, so could we have a game using the body in terms of, that would help a group I would work for one day synchronize better. So, and that would be kind of also an interlude, a way to stop thinking about our marketing issue and planning. So for 10 minutes, we would just work on synchronization, whether it's by walking or whether it's by using our hands face to face and feel the movement of the other. Simple exercises that people would not freak when I propose them, and I would bring them both joy and change their state, right?
Yeah. I've just realised there's actually a bit of a risk in this interview, in that you're the first guest I've had on who has a line of work pretty similar to my own. Like most of the other guests I may share practice backgrounds with, but you're the first guest that's come on really from that business application of embodiment. And this is going to be a fairly foreign area to many of those listening who are, say, Feldenkrais or yoga. Maybe we could sort of say, what does it look like if you're doing, say, a leadership workshop? Just paint a picture of that for people, because maybe they're imagining like kung fu or dance or something like that. Like, what does that actually look like when you've got 30 managers in business suits in a room and you're doing a workshop?
Well, so the first thing I want to say, though, is the big difference. But that is also something I experienced, and that was terrifying for me, is the difference between having a group of people who sign up to work with their body, right?
Yeah.
Like a dance class, like a Felon class session, okay, or an Aikido practice. Okay, so that's Okay, so as a facilitator, I'm facilitating, 10 or 20 people who want my stuff, who want to work with their body. So that's in the private field. That's what we have, because people they're not forced to go to a yoga class. Only volunteers go to yoga classes. And the big difference is that in the field of business, people come for a business purpose.
Yeah.
So, and you're mentioning leadership. That's already very specific. But usually, people come to work on business issues. So they want to work on the merging of this company with that company. They want to work on the restructuring of their work. They want to work on how this department could work better with that other department. They want to work on how that team could function better. So
practical thing, right?
And practical things and everything. And they're obsessed by that. Someone is paying for that. The people who are in the room don't all want to work on that. There's lots of politics within the group, in the room itself. People who hate each other's guts, people who lie with others. So a lot of,
low trust.
It's a complex field of relationship, and really where the body has no room that is given. So the given is that there's no room for the body, because we have to talk about these issues. And so in a way, as embodiment practitioner, the first is to get the authorization, the right to operate.
Like on EFC exam criteria, one of the exam criteria on EFC is really important, is like aim. Is like, what's the point? And I say to students, no one cares about your aikido or your tai chi or your dance. No one gives a shit. Like in those environments, people are like, look, our aim is to become better operating as a team so we can make more money. Well, our aim is to do whatever it is. So the things you talked about, for example. And then with a different level of buy-in and trust, nearly always, whether the consent, the safety, the authority, all has to be established. In a way, it doesn't when someone's just walked into a yoga class saying, yeah, we want to do yoga, like teach me. Like that's just in place already. So those two things, I think, are significantly different in those environments.
Yeah, to get that buy-in, an authentic buy-in is crucial. And really there's various types of intervention in business. And I think there's a lot of confusion because each type is a different context. And each context has its rules, and it's more or less easy to bring in the body. So one context where it's rather easy is the team building seminar.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that is in a way separate from business. It's okay, we're going to do something special.
Yeah. They're already out of the box, right? They're expecting something unusual.
Yeah.
If you do a drumming circle, they go, okay, this is a bit of fun. It's outside of what we normally do.
And in a way, they want something special. Otherwise it's going to be boring, So the danger is that in a way they want to have fun, amusement, not necessarily meaning. So that's the difficulty with that. And there's, of course, a lot of people who've, specialized in team building. So basically it's fun. Maybe there's a takeaway at the end. But if not, it doesn't matter. I don't know, maybe I'm bad-mouthing people who do team building.
I personally do very little of it. And when I do it, I say this isn't a jolly, which is kind of the British for a fun time. That you may actually cry during this team building. Are you okay with that? And that kind of scares off those who are looking for sort of fun entertainment. And, like those who are wanting deep values work or communication work, or even just the simple embodied typology to get to know each other better, to work better. I'm happy to do that. Like I was doing with AXA in Paris, actually. But in terms of just that sort of fun dancing monkey entertainment, I'm not interested in that anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and if you, for example, if you did what you work with a lot, like 4 elements, are a beautiful way for a team to build, to get to know each other, while everyone also, it's because it always starts there, starts to know oneself a little better as well, right? So team building is one area. But the second area is training. And you mentioned, for example, leadership training, where people want to learn to become better leader, or even just a better manager, right? And or a better speaker, or a better listener. And then basically you bring the body to help a learning cause,
Yeah. And skill acquisition. We're trying to learn the skill. The body's part of it, so we have to include the body.
And the question is to think, okay, so if we want to work on that competency, how does that translate body-wise, and then there's other area, there's other areas that I'm also interested in, is actually the business itself. So when people meet to work on a business issue, how can we bring the body to help their thinking about that particular business issue at that moment? Of course, that is, for me, the hardest, because that's where there's no room. It's very surprising. It's, we have little time. Why are we going to step aside and do that different activity? How's that going to bring a benefit now, not tomorrow, just now in the next hour?
This is why I think maybe some listeners may not understand if they're not in that corporate world. And some may, many are, so I'm not patronizing, but the idea of like, okay, you've got 10 minutes, Pierre, or, I've been asked, okay, go on stage, you've got 10 minutes before we do the rest of our, the rest of our process for our business, change something now. That, or the fact that everyone in the room that's there, the company's losing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of euros, just by the fact they're not working that day. And the cost is not what they pay me as a trainer. The cost is the downtime. So the HR person who's booking me is like, do not waste their time, because they know that they're going to get in real trouble if they do. And it's like, it's not about the money to those guys. It's about the lack of time. And I've been on dance seminars where the teacher spent 3 hours just exploring something to see if it was interesting and didn't tell anyone why. And I just thought that's the absolute opposite of what I could ever get away with in a business setting, unless the clients know me a long time.
Yes, exactly. And I don't say, I have, of course, different ways to talk about it. Each time for me, it's an improvisation. But definitely in terms of the cognitive reason, what I try to put forward is the importance of our state in relationship to performance.
Yep.
Performance is really the word that can get you in if you take it seriously, because that's what they're after, and that's legitimate. If a business that's,
it's fair enough, right? Yeah, it's fair enough. Don't waste the time. It's fair enough.
And if any business that's not performing is going to go under, and so that's
will lose their jobs. We're not messing around, Like, I don't want people to hear this like we hate business. It's quite the opposite. For me, it's like, I want the companies I work with to do well, assuming they're doing something basically ethical. I want to support. And I find that, talking to performance and bottom line, and then there's also just the languaging, right? Like the words you put things in. Like if I came in with my aikido language or my yoga language or my Buddhist language, I'm going to be out the door. I wouldn't get in the door.
So exactly. So performance means different things in depending on the context, but usually it comes up to having the right action, in a Buddhist term, it's right action. But you need to give meaning to that. What is the right action now? Is it to be able to decide on a new course of action? Oh, right. Okay, so that's right action. To be able to plan. Okay, or to be able to invent a new vision. It's okay. So that's we need. So performance is to be able to do that well. Okay, in order to have that performance, that right action, we need to have right perception. People understand that. They understand that if they don't perceive their world in the right way, they are not going to be able to make the right decisions. Right? And now the question is, what do we need in order to have the right perception of our situation, of our business, of the other, of the issue, and the right action? We need to be in the right state. Are you in the right state now? And so we can then explore the different states as they experience them every day, because they know that. They know that some days they are stressed. They know some days, like they go in that meeting. That meeting was just hell. Like people were not listening to each other, but because everybody's so stressed, as you say, and so their mind is so occupied by many things, so they're not really there. Okay, so are you happy with that? Do you think that's performance? And so for me, that is a door that I use a lot. I use it a lot. And I use more the state than the body, and I say the body is a direct route to change your state, and that's what if you're interested, we can play with that.
Great. So you're speaking to concerns, direct route. That's speaking to the concern of lack of time. This is direct, or as Wendy says, this is a shortcut. I often say, look, I'm not going to tell you how to do your job, and you tell me, is your job based on relationships? Great. And so let's look at that level. And then what are relationships based on? Your state, your stress, your self-awareness, your state management. Okay, great. I'll help you with that level. Exactly. And that immediately saying, look, I'm not here to tell you how to do your job, but your job is based on this I and we kind of elements to it rather than just the it elements. I just want to point listeners, I did a podcast called How to Work in Business, a Guide for Hippies. So if you're interested in any of this, have a look at that and the ebook that comes with it that's free. It's real EFC type content. What I want to ask you about is actually the stuff that you're way better than me on by all accounts, is the facilitation side. So we're both very good trainers, but you do group facilitation, right? You use some of these processes like World Cafe. Can you say a little bit about what some of them are, because listeners may not know them, and B, how the body fits in?
Okay. When I started in this work in beginning of the 90s, in the corporate world and also in the public sector, just the same, when people would meet, it would basically be to listen to presentation for a whole day. Mm-hmm. So the format of being together would be to listen to someone, maybe ask questions at the end, and then have another presentation. Basically, it's the model of the classical school. I mean, unfortunately, we still know it. And the idea of facilitation, which for young people now becomes something normal, but was absolutely not normal then. It was the idea of how could we use our time together differently, and instead of listening to work that's already done, work on issues and find ways to be intelligent together instead of stupid together, and come up with common representations of where we at, what is at stake, and invent possible solutions for whatever problems or whatever objectives that we want to reach. And so there's a lot of people who start to have the intuition that it was possible, but that needed a different way of relating to one another. And so the technology was a technology about relationships, about how to speak and how to listen, and a technology of processes. What could be intelligent processes, i.e. steps to tackle different types of issues. And so there's all sorts of people who did brilliant work of organizing conversations in a productive way. So you mentioned World Cafe, Juanita Brown and David Isaacs, who invented a beautiful process which allows for people to really talk about the issues, the questions that are important to them, and bring the same kind of intimacy that we have when we are small groups of 2, 3, 4 into groups of 100, 200 people. So it's a beautiful way to organize small conversation and link them together. And here,
literally sitting in like little tables, they might be writing on the table, they might be going between tables. I kind of want to paint a picture here, because I've been a part of quite a few of these, and for people outside of the training and coaching world, it's a slightly foreign idea, isn't it? And they're all based on this idea of like collective intelligence rather than collective stupidity, as you call it, right?
Yeah, and for dancers, actually, for me, it was a dance. It's a dance because a dance is a choreography, right? So imagine a space, how you organize your dancers. So here the dancers are people with business suits, maybe, but you put them in groups of 4, and they are each doing the same task of exploring an inquiry, a question of, for example, what did we do really well this past month? Or what do we really want to achieve in the field of, creating a new organization or whatever? What would be, what should we work on? That would be a beautiful question, a very open question. So the whole room is having this conversation. And then there's a moment after maybe 15, 20 minutes where there's a signal, and the groups are going to split. One person is going to stay, and the others are going to be the ambassadors of this conversation. So they're going to bring a little bit of that experience of what was found, and they're going to take it to, like bees, to other groups. And the conversation is going to go on, but nurtured by this past round. And by a process of repetitive enriching of the conversation, we'll come to a point where we'll be able to hear what comes out of the whole room. And it's a beautiful moment of just one person speaking for the whole audience from where he's at now. And we're basically harvesting the intelligence of the group. And so that's one process. But you see, it is very much about movement, about a choreography. And actually, I remember being in dance workshops for weekends and having ideas from my dance of how to facilitate differently another group, like how. Because dance is very much about that. It's about, okay, what are we doing? How are we organizing our space? How are we moving? How are we changing roles? Should we have groups of 2, 3, 4, 8? It's different. Each group has a different dynamic, allows and prevents certain things, right?
And it's very much in the field of a sort of facilitator. I mean, certain people listening may have this idea of the trainer as kind of like the teacher, and I like that very much myself, but there's also this idea of the facilitator who isn't telling everyone what to do. They're merely kind of conducting this process which has a life of its own. It's much more of a kind of hands-off kind of process.
Absolutely. And it's very difficult also for some consultants who have opinions about the subject itself to become facilitator. I had to really change my hat, and those are different hats. It's very interesting what you're pointing at, and some people are really specialized in one area, and they identify with a role. Like, for example, if they come from martial arts or have been martial art teachers, it's a particular way to teach a group.
There are no martial arts facilitators.
No.
You know what I mean? There might be dance facilitators, but there ain't no martial arts facilitators. And yoga too. I mean, I hear yoga teachers say, I'm a facilitator. It's like, no, you fucking not.
No.
I've never seen a facilitated yoga class. Maybe little bits of facilitation within...
Dancers, dance teachers can be facilitator. I've had wonderful teachers who I was astounded. I say, how does this guy always manages to say or suggest a new way to move exactly at the moment where I'm beginning to do it myself. But he's putting a name, like, for example, stretch a little more, or give more weight, or shake a little more, or go more toward the ceiling, whatever. And I realized that he was basically saying what he was seeing already in the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he was already there. Maybe he was already there as in half the room, or maybe only one person. And he was taking that idea, but by giving it more room through his voice, it would expand and become alive in the rest of the room. He was facilitating.
Yeah, I see some really high-end Five Rhythms teachers that do that really well, like Adam Barley, who we had on the show, on the movement medicine founder, very likely. And the sort of junior ones tend to more teach. Like, I don't want to give the impression that facilitation is better than teaching or training. It's sometimes for me, I find it a sort of communist nightmare, a lot of these processes. And that's more of a sort of personal reactivity to them. And it's also just like where my skill set lies, knowing that I have certain better skill set as a teacher, for example, rather than as a facilitator. And that's okay too, right? It's just knowing Absolutely. That it's a possibility.
That's, I think that's something we need to each one live with. I mean, do we have a preferred style, and really, is it right for us to just concentrate on that style, or does one need to go from one another? I mean, I'm someone who's always made bridges between areas. I need variety. I need to have different roles. So it's very fitting for me to be a consultant at some moment, a facilitator another, a very prescriptive teacher. When I teach embodiment, I'm very directive, and I think embodiment is, I think it's, well, at least you see, that's my way to think. I questioned that when I was going to say that, but I think there's it's a very teaching. At least my mode is very teaching and directive, and I like moving from one another. When I facilitate dialogue in a group, it's the most silent work. I do nothing. I'm just there, sitting, and I let the group talk. But I host the space. I hold the space, and holding space is also a work of embodiment.
Well, this is one of those terms I hear a lot, and I remember my friend's German scientist girlfriend asked him what holding space meant, and she was very dissatisfied with the answer that he gave. So, what does it mean to you, Pierre, if you're holding space? I have a sense of it, but I'd love to hear your take on it. Feel free to pass. Feel free to pass on that one.
No, I'll take the challenge. I don't know how I'm going to answer, but I know that it is very easy to be disappointing when we're trying to put words on something that can be elusive, that's not really tangible. And each time we go, each time we have to talk about space, Mark, it's a tricky one, right? Space, vibration. I mean, light. We see light, for example. Us human, we obsess by elements, by separate elements. Our eyes only perceive what stops light. We're not perceiving light. Let me try to say a word about holding space. It has to do with presence, the quality of presence, and that is very elusive. I mean, we have a direct experience of when we are with someone. We can feel, oh yes, there is spaciousness here, or there's tightness here. And how do we know that? I maybe I don't know myself. It's a kind of direct knowledge. It's a felt sense, right? So holding space is having imagining yourself as really a container, or being in a relationship with the power of containing, So it's really a way to direct one's intention at the possibility of being spacious enough for anything to happen and be fully okay, fully attended to, not repressed, and with that, at least my own state being bothered. So it's a way to be stable, but alive, so be moved by what's going on, but while remaining in peaceful, stable state. And by doing so, encouraging of the possibility for that experience being possible for the rest of the group. It's almost if there's only one person in a group who's able to be in that state, it also affects the rest of the group. And of course, it's better if when all participants can have an attitude of, such presence. And that's what makes unique dialogue, when we are all kind of tuning on this specific way to be.
And you're talking really about one aspect of what we could call embodied leadership, right? Or state leadership. When there's one person who's able to hold the calm or the openness or whatever the kindness, the quality is, that could be really, really helpful to even up, a whole room or a whole audience full of stressed out people.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got 20 spacious minutes left, if that works for you.
That's wonderful.
And there's two topics I really want to cover. One is embodied leadership a little bit more, because you do a lot of work with that area. And the other one is France and French and embodiment. So you're our first French guest, even though we have loads of French and loads of French-speaking Belgium listeners. You're our first French teacher on. I, in some ways, struggle to find French teachers to have on. I'm very welcome, very open to suggestions from listeners. And, I know, for example, in France, there's a lot of martial arts and government-sponsored aikido teachers, judo teachers everywhere. It has a strong dance tradition, obviously. However, like we don't hear much from France in the wider embodiment world. I hear far more from Germany, for example. And I'm wondering if that's purely linguistic, like there's a language barrier, or, maybe you could say a little bit about the state of the embodiment world in France.
Well, I'm struggling to find people who could be inspiring for me in France, really. I think the field is just opening. We don't have a word for embodiment. That does not help. And really, I find myself kind of one of the person who was opening that field. But I know a woman who's started with the coaching, somatic coaching, and she's a classical dancer. So what we have in France is a lot of people interested in the field of psychology. So we have people in Gestalt. We have a lot of various schools, but which are mainly foreign, actually. So they're branches of American or Anglo-Saxon schools. We have Danny Bois, who's been a very unique contributor to the field. He's a fascia therapist to start with. But there's a whole interesting work, somatopsychopedagogy. It's a very long word. Somatopsychopedagogy. Danny Bois, B-O-I-S. And he's been around for a long time. He's really a pioneer. He created a university in Spain. He's had problems in France for a while because the government wanted to label him as a sect. And see if I'm saying that, it's not to say anything bad about Danny Bois. It's actually to talk about the situation in France. And one of the reasons... Sorry.
like government regulation of things. For example, to be an aikido teacher in France, on the one hand, you can get all this government funding, but on the other hand, there's quite a lot of government regulation around it. In a way, as in England, you can just set yourself up and it's no big deal.
Absolutely. And you even have that for dancers. It's terrible. You have to pass an exam and with the criteria are governmental. So it's terrible. But the idea of sect is very prevalent in France. And I had to actually also deal with that. So when you deal with the body in France, you risk to be labeled as someone wanting to manipulate others.
Like a cult, you mean? People
like a cult. I'm sorry. Yes, like a cult.
Yeah. No, I get what you mean now. Okay.
Sorry,
wow. So
my English.
I think that's something. No, your English is way better than my French, man. Is there something in French culture that privileges the collective as well? Like my experience of working in France, which is not huge, but it's reasonable over the years, is that it's sort of all the C's: clever, cognitive, critical, and combative. Like there's an like I get some of the best questions I ever get asked in France, but very much from a mind point of view.
Absolutely.
Like this Cartesian, cutting, arguing, discerning, which was just quite, when I first went out there, I was like, guys, just fucking try it, you know? Like give it a go. There was this sort of cognitive criticism of everything that I found quite tricky.
Well, the Anglo-Saxon way is you try and then you see what you've learned from it. In France, it's the opposite. So you have to explain, blah, 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 understand all the thing, and then maybe we're going to try. At least that's the format where we come from. These past years, I think I see a big evolution in France. In the past, it's progressive, of course, evolution. It's well, I see it, I guess, 20 years. So I'm going to basically, talk about myself. So at the level of my career, I see a big progression. And things that were not possible before are becoming possible. And people are accepting more and more to try first and then talk about it, for example. But definitely regarding the body, there too, I think it's before it was just not tolerated at all, at least in the field of business or institutions. And but the beautiful thing is that it's it's about novelty. So where does innovation come from, and how can a system accept progressively exactly the thing that is hard for him or it to accept, but that it needs the most, So the body is what we need the most at work, but it's also what's not there. So it's a tricky situation, So it's coming in progressively. And the way I saw it come, I remember very well when I noticed more and more clients of mine, polytechnicians, people who are really engineers or very much in their mind, and they were starting to talk about what their wives are doing. And they would do that in a funny way. I said, my wife, she does yoga. And,
that's pretty typical in the city of London too, the successful kind of businessman and then the yoga wife, And they're very positive influences, I find.
Yeah, but at the same time, so first it was kind of on almost a derogatory way, but more and more it's becoming in an appreciative way because they see the difference and so they start to get interested in these practices more and more. And now I have more and more clients who, at least on their personal time, are doing things with their body. And so that's a big change already. And I think that is changing society. So when then you come back to the office and you offer, okay, we're going to do something that comes from Tai Chi. Oh yeah, Tai Chi, that's interesting. Their view is changing. So yeah, we have a whole history that does not help. So we are not, France is not leader. We're not, we are not being conditioned to be a leader in the field of embodiment. That's for sure. And that's why I had to study elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm really looking, for people out there in France. I find them far less easy to find than, say, Germany or Sweden, other European countries, and certainly, and those, it's still easy to find in America. I think that's part of our kind of conditioning in Europe, and maybe holding ourselves back as much as anything. Sometimes I'm reminded of the guillotine when I think about embodiment in France. There's this idea of cutting off the head, or the head being the critical part, of the person. And there's this other element of French culture I really enjoy, and have enjoyed since I went there for the first time as a teenager, was this kind of aesthetic refinement that I find in France, like an emphasis on elegance and beauty and refinement. And I find that very lovely. And I'm almost confused that isn't an embodying factor somehow. Does that make sense? Like sometimes it's kind of like upper chakra pleasure rather than kind of lower kind of pleasure. And I wonder if you could say something a little bit about that French orientation towards refinement and pleasure.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yes. Yes. The word that comes to me is taste. and of course, between you and I, Mark, the French have the best taste.
You guys are such snobs. But that's what we're talking about, is the refinement of taste, whether it be in philosophy, sexuality. I've had French girlfriends, and they were just incredibly confusing. I had no idea if they liked me or not until, we're having sex. And that they were able to make beauty in African kind of hellholes I was in at the time. And this refinement and ability to take stuff to the transcendent and the increasingly skilled, whether it be in art or music or sexuality or cheese or whatever the fuck it is. I feel whenever I'm in Paris, I feel crude. And I am crude, as you know, but I feel extra crude when I'm in Paris. And somehow judged in that. My wife said I've never felt more judged than when she walked through Paris. And she's a good-looking woman. So it wasn't just about how she was dressed. And that's the sort of dark side of it, right? Is that we're the best. And there's why a lot of people don't like the French, because they don't understand that that's not a personal attack. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I had the same experience after living 7 years in the US, and I'm married to an American woman. When I came back, I saw people looking at me in a funny way, and I guess they were looking at my shoes because I didn't have the right kind of shoes, and it took me a while to notice it, but that was obvious, and I checked, and and so really, yes, taste when it comes with pretension. And it becomes a very dangerous cocktail. And taste, when it's appreciative, is wonderful, because also the French are able to appreciate a lot of what's beautiful in other aesthetics worldwide. But definitely now, the good thing is that taste is everywhere, and there's a lot of competition for the French.
There's more Michelin-star restaurants in London than Paris, mate. But I often find myself defending the French. I say, no, they're not really assholes. It's just that they love beauty and refinement, and they, when they talk, they criticize because they have this Cartesian method in school, and that's kind of how I'm a big lover of the French, and. So don't hear if anyone's French is out there writing angry emails to me or Pierre right now.
But Mark, don't you think there's also an aesthetic in our work in embodiment?
Sure. Absolutely. I think refinement and taste is a critical element. I'm just employing someone to be the beauty manager of my next Embodied Yoga Principles teacher training, because I view it as a personal weakness, and I'm employing Tess, who I think to come in and make everything gorgeous, because I see there's a real value in that. And beauty and refinement leads us towards feeling, right? Because it motivates us.
Absolutely. And there's beauty in space, there's beauty of how we stand and carry ourselves. And there's also beauty in processes and in in the way we teach. Maybe that will branch on the subject of leadership. We just designed a big leadership program, and it holds on one page. You can the principles are on just one page, and that is beautiful. It's a beautiful design. It's a very simple design.
People elegant here, aren't you?
Very elegant.
I had a French girlfriend, and she could wear jeans and a white T-shirt and look better than an English girl in a £1,000 dress. And because she had this ability to be elegant, it wasn't just that she was fancy. And a training design can be like that, can't it? It can be like, okay, this is simple technique, simple design. That I think is really worth learning from.
Actually, that's one of the things I learned from Wendy Palmer in a way in her training, because I had designed so many different, had a whole catalog of exercises, had some models that I had done for myself. And when someone told me, "Oh, you should check out Wendy Palmer, she's doing great work," I went to her workshop. She was not very interested in what I had to offer, but she definitely had something to offer that was precious. And
no comment. But I mean, her work is beautifully straightforward, isn't it? It's step by step. And for people that don't know, Wendy Palmer is one of the leading names in working with the body and leadership. Leadership embodiment system. We have her as a guest trainer sometimes. System is a really a clear piece of work, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it's been a foundation. I was, the first one of our first students in Europe to actually facilitate leadership embodiment training, which is the word she uses to describe her training, and really a practical way, elegant way. To bring embodiment in the workplace, and your work is the same for me. It's because it's organized, it's simple. We are constantly working on the same basic principles, and principles are so important.
So for listeners out there, come to the subject of leadership, they might think of a leader as, like a commander or a corporate, corporate CEO. Why is the body relevant to people in positions of leadership or informal leadership?
Well, there's many ways to look at leadership, and I don't think leadership should be mistaken for having the best, the top job in an organization. I think really leadership is about the ability to create great things, to cross obstacles, and inspire others to do the same. So yes, when you have a big job, you're director of an operation, you're the boss, you're the head of an operation, you have the responsibility to inspire others, to have them do, work is more and more challenging. People have to change constantly. It's not repetitive. If you have only in an organization people giving their minimum, it's not going to go far. So the ability to kindle passion and that extra, goodwill in people, and to kindle their collective intelligence again is crucial to leadership. And it's not commanding that is so important for that. Is to really create an environment where people want to give their best. It's also so the ability to listen is crucial, and the ability to decide is also crucial. And what I see in organization often is that there's a lot of hesitation when it comes to deciding.
Yeah, there's the ability.
Please decide. And
the ability to cut, the ability to clearly enter the arena. Strozzi would probably call it from aikido. That is a leadership skill as much as the empathic listening, the catalyst. My friends from a group called Nowhere would probably call one of the skills you talked about. Like, the key thing is that all these key leadership capacities have an embodied element, right?
Oh, they all have one. Yeah.
None of the things we're talking about are like knowing about something.
Absolutely. One of the exercises I repeatedly do is ask people to think about someone who who's been an influence for them, or someone who represents leadership. So, whether it's Mandela, or I often think about my grandmother as far as I'm concerned, because I had a wonderful grandmother, definitely a leader in our family, and to think about one quality of that person. And so on a flip chart, when you have a group of 15 people, and you just put these adjectives, you have a portrait that's not made from books, but made from people's experience. What do you see? You have perseverance, courage, so things about moving forward, energy. You have the listening, the love, the attention, the presence, and you have also intellectual qualities, but more in the sense of vision, imagination. And they all have an embodied quality. I ask them, is it embodied? Is the body have anything to do? Can you perceive that when you see the person enter in a room? And they say, yes, we can see. So if you can feel, it has to do with the body.
Yeah, and I say to them, and I think I got this from either Richard or Wendy, I may have come up with it. I think these guys preceded me in this. I say, look, what makes a good leader? And people would list off all these qualities. And they'll say they're confident, they're empathic, they're all these words, And then I'll say, okay, how do you develop those in yourself? And the room goes silent, because it's like they think they're just permanent character traits that you're lucky or unlucky to have. And there's no sense that you could actually develop them. There's no practice or praxis. I can't like the German word for it. There's no real praxis there. And I go, okay, so how can you develop as leaders if you've just told me these are the most important capacities? Cognitive intelligence is normally in there, but it's normally like 1 of 10,
Absolutely.
And it's important, but it's not the only one. It's certainly not the only one. And I said, well, how do you develop these? If not, and then I say, well, would you like a way of developing these? And of course, at that point, people are interested.
Yeah. And it's not like I see you have many books behind you, Mark.
I haven't read most of them. Yeah, they're just in there to make me look good. I'm Skype coaching.
But reading about being audacious doesn't make you audacious.
If someone's read a lot of good books on kissing, does it make them an excellent lover? What is it Wendy calls them? Shelf help.
Shelf help. That's a beautiful expression. Yes.
Listen, we need to move through this wrap up. So 2 things to finish. First one, where can people find out more about you and your work?
They can go on the internet site, Presence Leadership. So it's the company is called Presence and Leadership, but it's presenceleadership.net. And I teach in France, but also everywhere in Europe, also in Morocco, in Germany very much lately, Russia for the first time. I'm going to discover that country. So we'll travel. I speak Spanish and you are international. You're one of the people spreading this all around Europe, like me. One of the pioneers of working with the body in business in Europe. I'm glad there's a few of us. A new cup in Holland, a new in Paris. There's a sort of group of us, and of course I'll be seeing you in Spain. So with Paul Linden, so we can hang out there. I've definitely got more things I want to chat about. And finally, Pierre, a final message about the body for our listeners. You see, as human beings, I think we have 3 things to learn that animals are not bothered with. We have to learn our relationship to nature. It is not natural, and boy, do we need to relearn it as a collectivity. We have to learn our relationship to one another. And this is why dialogue is so important, the ability to dialogue with each other. But we also have to learn the relationship to oneself. It's not a given. Animals have it. I mean, it's whatever relationship they have, that's what they have. I mean, we have choice there, as you like often to point out. And in terms of learning a better relationship to oneself, to learn to unify our body with our mind, to learn to be present with our body and to begin to know this body and know how to use it is a revolution. It's really part of our work as human beings. And it's also what is so needed. And this is why I'm so passionate about it. I think those three revolutions, if we can combine the three, all the better, are what's important for us as humans at this point of our history, more than ever.
Beautiful, Pierre. Merci beaucoup.
Merci à toi, Marc, et merci de nous avoir écoutés.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to get more. If you'd like to help us build the Embodied Tribe, leave a review on iTunes or share this on your social media. If you're interested in training globally, sign up to receive the newsletter at embodiedfacilitator.com. Until next time, welcome home to the body.